here today to explore the benefits of chiropractic. With us to help with that is Dr. David Kosmic, as well as several other degrees in reflexology, acupuncture, and holistic medicine. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day.
Well, I'm glad to do so.
You glad to see me when I'm not broken?
It's always good to see you anyway.
I can't remember how many years it's been you've been fixing that.
Oh yeah, it's been a long time.
Well, this interview is for our speech class, and so perhaps you could share with us some techniques you use to gather information from new patients who may be nervous about their first visits.
Well, one of the things I've found useful with people is, first of all, you try to honor their space for a little bit. They come in, they start taking off their coat or something, they sit down, and then I ask them, please tell me about your problem. Even though I have read the material that they've given me on their history and so on, I ask them to tell me what your problem is. And then when they start describing the pain, I say, stand up, please, and show me. Turn around and show me. And they begin to relax at that point, because somebody's actually listening to them and paying attention to them, and I haven't touched them yet. And then once they've described the pain, then I can approach them and say, now, you're saying the pain is here, and I touch them wherever it is that they say their pain is expressing itself. And then we begin to discuss the sources and so on, what might be done, and etc. And usually by that time they're relaxed enough to let me treat them, or at least give me an idea of what their problem really is. Sometimes it's not what they came in for.
Well, you've been treating people for over 30 years. Could you share an interesting story?
No.
With us?
Well, when you asked that question, one case popped into my head. I had a young woman come to see me who had a lot of emotional problems as well as physical problems. She was a teenager, probably about 13 or so when I first saw her. She was a difficult child. And her mother came to see me and asked me if I would take a look at her daughter. So she brought the daughter in, and we began treating her, and we started using nutritional supplementation. We used some acupuncture, dietary changes, exercise, chiropractic adjustments, and so on. And she didn't make a great deal of progress. She had a lot of problems going on with it, but eventually she progressed enough that she was able to become independent and leave home to go to school and start a new life for herself. Her mother came in a couple of months after the girl had gone, and I asked how she was doing, and she said, well, she's doing fine, but I found out something interesting when she left. I said, what's that? She said, well, I was cleaning the clothes out of her dresser in her bedroom, because we had packed up everything for her, and she wanted these things shipped to her school. And I found all of the supplements that you had given her over the years unopened in the bottom of one of her clothing drawers. She had never used a thing we had given her. She had just used the try. And I just thought it was quite a remarkable thing. There were several $100s worth of supplements in that drawer.
After all those years.
Yeah, it's a remarkable thing. It's what some people will do, just out of stubbornness.
Want to be a better person.
Yes, right. And then, of course, there's always the person who comes in who's a complete skeptic. And they come in because their spouse has forced them in. And they've tried everything for 10 years, and nothing has ever helped it. And they've been in constant pain. And they come back after the first visit, and they've got this look of awe on their face. I don't believe it, but I don't hurt anymore.
That was my exact experience.
Yeah, and that's remarkably encouraging for me. I enjoy those kinds of experiences.
I've read in some history, when I was doing some research for this, that in the 20s, many chiropractors were arrested for practicing without a license.
Yes, it was an odd period in our history. There's some interesting things about that. I've known a few of the doctors that grew up in families where that was going on, They told some interesting stories about their fathers or their grandfathers dealing with this situation. One of the things they told me that was interesting was that the doorways in the old days had the bottom panel removed and a glass plate put into them in the chiropractor's homes, so they could see the shoes of whoever was knocking at their front door, and that would tell them by the shoes whether it was a policeman or not, because they all wore the same kind of shoes. So then they could boogie out the back door or down in the basement or not be home or whatever. Another interesting thing was that there were many cases of chiropractors being sent to jail, and then the local jailers would start telling them about their problems, and they'd end up adjusting their jailers through the bars of their cages.
I was also reading that many of the patients just refused to press charges or
Oh, yeah.
participate in the trials, and most of them just went right back to their lives.
That's right.
Seems like the doctors with all the political influence have been trying to get rid of the competition. Do you think that still persists today?
Well, there was a landmark case called Wilkes et al. Back in the 70s. And Dr. Wilkes, a chiropractor, and several other chiropractors were given some documentation from the AMA's, shall I say, confidential files by a man that we nicknamed Sore Throat. And it turned out that the court found, the judge in this case found that the AMA, the American Hospital Association, the American Physical Therapy Association, and so on, a multitude of these associations have been in collusion to destroy chiropractic for several years since the mid-50s. And they had done some underhanded things like false news stories and so on that were being propagated to the press, and quite a few other things, but they were forced to stop all of that. And that's about the same time we got into Medicare. But the AMA was the only one that didn't drop out and settle quietly. They stood and took their punishment, more or less, which was basically they were told to never do anything like this again, and that was it. And today I find more and more of the current day new doctors coming out of school that are quite a bit less prejudiced about other fields of treatment. Some of them embrace nutrition, some of them embrace acupuncture, chiropractic, physical therapy, and so on as viable parts of the healing process.
Also in the research, I found that only 6 to 12% of people actually come to see a chiropractor, but 1 in 3 Americans suffer pain chronically, and it seems like the Western medicines let them down if they're chronically in pain. Do you think more people could benefit from chiropractic care?
Well, I would say that goes without saying. However, the problem has always been in it. How do we chiropractors help people understand what we do? How do we teach them what we do? How do we let them know that we aren't just bone crackers? We're not just pseudo-scientific quacks. The fact that a chiropractor saved my 5-year-old daughter's life was what turned me to chiropractic. And up to that point, I didn't know anything about chiropractic. There's a great deal of, ignorance. And ignorance is not a bad thing. It's just, ignorance is just uninformed. There's a lot of ignorance out there about a lot of different forms of treatment that could help. But the medical field is monopolized by the technology and by the pharmaceuticals. So trying to get past all that commercial presentation and get to the alternatives that might be less expensive and less how shall I say it, less gratifying economically for the physician. Um, but getting past that and getting the American public to be aware of the possibilities of what alternatives might be, that's a big chore. And I can see that there are areas where it's being done. There are certain hospitals that are allowing chiropractors and acupuncturists and so on to work on their facilities. There are certain medical facilities that are offering alternative nutritional care in treatment for some of the more intractable problems like cancer and so on.
You mentioned your interest in chiropractic began when one saved your 5-year-old daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be willing to share that story?
Oh, well, in brief, I was seeing him because I'd been in an automobile accident and hurt my neck. A friend had told me I should see a chiropractor for my neck pain. And my daughter had become ill and thought she had the flu. She was only 5 at the time. After 3 days, we became convinced it wasn't the flu. She vomited up everything we gave her, even water. She was dehydrated. She was pale and sick and weak, and we took her to the hospital, to the emergency room, and said, "We don't know. This is not the flu. What's going on? What's wrong with her?" And the MDs ran a battery of tests on her, including a test on her CSF, cerebral spinal fluid, as well as x-rays and blood tests, and they couldn't find anything wrong with her. They thought maybe spinal meningitis or something like that. Nothing. They couldn't find anything wrong with her. But she was dehydrated, so they put her in a hospital bed with the IV for saline and glucose and said, "We'll have to wait and see and do more tests." So I had an appointment with my chiropractor that next day. I told him about what was going on. He said, "Well, you know, the problem could be in her back." And he explained to me how that was so after I questioned him about it. And then I asked him if he'd take a look at it, and he agreed to go with me. However, he insisted that we go plain clothes. He would not wear anything that would indicate he was a doctor, and he wanted me to make sure that there was nobody in the room when we examined my daughter. So I stood in front of the door while he examined her, and he found a spot on her back that he said was probably the problem because it was related to the stomach. And again, we had a discussion about how is this so and so on. Central nervous system controls all the organs of the body. Anyway, he asked me if I would let him adjust her, and I said, "Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. Go ahead." I heard this crack from where I was standing, and I said, "Oh, honey, are you all right?" And she said, "My tummy doesn't hurt anymore, Daddy." And that evening, she held down fluids for the first time. Next morning, she was famished, held down solid food. The MDs took the IVs out of her arm and said, "Well, we don't know, but she's all better." And up to that point, I had finished my bachelor's degree, heading for the ministry in the Episcopal Church. And I changed my direction that day. I went down and talked to the chiropractic college because I figured if they could do that, I'd like to know how it's done. That was an incredible example of the power of healing, just with your hands.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with us today?
Only that with all of what we have discovered in the medical field and in science and so on, we still don't understand everything. The human body is simply complex and complexly simple. It's an amazing creation. We can take a terrible amount of punishment and keep on going, like the Ever Ready Bunny, or a Timex watch. I think that people should be open-minded about the mysteries of life, and not try to say that they have all the answers or they finally figured it out. That's too much of a flat earth statement to me. I think that keeping our minds open and allowing other opinions to teach us is the only way we're going to keep making progress.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time, Doctor.
Thank you.